I've spent most of my life learning the lessons I'm going to teach you in this video the hard way. Everyone's heard the saying, nice guys finish last, and although there's some truth to it, it doesn't have to be that way. Let's start with my story. I'll be honest, it's not pretty, and looking back on some of my choices, I cannot believe I ever let myself get that low. But I think this story is important to share. I might be able to prevent some of you from making the same mistakes, or at least help you get better if you've already been down this road. I spent most of my teen years in countless unfulfilling relationships, both with friends, girlfriends, and at some point I decided I need to make a change. So I packed up my stuff and moved away from all the people and things I was familiar with in a grand attempt at ultimate self-improvement. I then spent the next 2 or so years entirely focused on building myself up. I got a good job, my own place, started making good money. I lost all the weight that I had put on during my party phase. I built my credit, bought my dream car, and started working on a business. I finally stopped living my life controlled by my emotions and learned how to process them and not allow them to make my choices for me. After all that hard work, I decided I was ready to find someone to share it with, and that I did. Things were great at first, but I started to lose myself within the relationship. It was like a sort of high that felt so good at the time that I couldn't see the world crumbling beneath my feet. I hadn't experienced that sort of joy in so long, I forgot how to manage it. I turned into the ultimate yes man. It didn't matter what happened to me as long as she was happy, and I convinced myself all the sacrifice was worth it because it was my job as a man, and that she'd love me more because of all the things I did for her. The first thing to go was my gym routine. She didn't have a car and took the bus everywhere, and she always told me about all those close calls and how unsafe it was, so I took it upon myself. I'd wake up at 6 a.m. and instead of going to the gym like I normally did, I'd drive an hour across town to get her to college, and then I'd drive another hour and a half to get to work. I worked 12-hour shifts, so when she got off, I was still working. I'd then Uber her home. I did this 5 days a week for almost a year. I no longer had the time or the energy to go to the gym, which before I met her was the main thing I did for my mental health. She wasn't working, and she was overwhelmed with the difficulty of going to school full-time, so when she decided to get a job, I offered to cover everything while she went to school. Now, I made great money, but not enough to finance an expensive lifestyle for two. I remember seeing all these videos and TikToks on what a man is supposed to be, so I would never say no to her, and before I knew it I was broke, relying on credit cards to continue to finance our expensive lifestyle. I told myself it would all be worth it and what I'm doing is honorable, and maybe it would have been, but there are so many red flags and issues with the relationship that I ignored and they shouldn't have gone unnoticed. I had even caught her talking to other guys in a relationship sort of way twice. I forgave her both times and continued to take care of everything. I convinced myself that she had never been in a relationship with a good guy and that her apologies were genuine and that it would never happen again. So I continued the same yes man, simpish behavior for a long time. I eventually found myself in a situation where my credit cards were close to maxed out and I wasn't making enough money. She promised she loved me for me and would have my back, but as soon as the expensive dates and constant ability to take care of everything in her life stopped, she woke up one morning and cut it off. She explained it was to work on herself and wanted me to wait 4 months for her, and like an idiot, I seriously considered it. I found out a couple weeks later she started seeing one of the dudes I had caught her talking to. Now, this story isn't meant to bash her in any way, but there were a lot of important lessons I learned with this experience. My issue was not always the fact that I did too much, but that I refused to walk away when I should have, and there was a clear and evident lack of self-respect on my end. I tied my personal value in the relationship to what I could do for her and not in who I was, and in the end, none of it mattered anyways. There was a period of time where I thought I was some sort of anomaly. Quite honestly, I was ashamed of the level of disrespect I not only tolerated, but encouraged. I threw away years of progress for someone who clearly had no respect or love for me, and it was a shameful experience. I mean, I spent years studying Stoic philosophy and other forms of philosophy, but there I went, going against everything I believed in and suffering the ultimate consequence because of it. I decided it's time to go back to basics, get myself right again, and figure out what went wrong. How could I go from having it all together to falling apart in less than a year? The immature part of me wanted to blame her, but none of it really was her fault, was it? We simply were not right for each other, and I refused to accept that. I did a bit of self-evaluation. The only conclusion that made sense is that I clearly struggled with self-worth. I must be insecure to some extent, but I couldn't figure out why. Truly, I'm blessed in a lot of areas, and there are plenty of other people who have it way worse or are way more sure of themselves. So what was it? I started to talk to other guys, and I found out my experience was not uncommon. The thing that I heard over and over again was that modern women are just like that now. Being raised entirely by women, I refused to accept that notion. It seemed to be filled with misogyny, so I did a little bit more research. And as it turns out, a lot of women have also gone through a similar experience. It has has nothing to do with gender, it's a deeper issue. How many times have you heard the story of the woman who always gives that piece of garbage another chance, the cheater, the abuser, etc.? Men do it too. We tend to put our partners on a pedestal. It's something primal within us. We want to have a princess to save, or a family to provide for. Why is it that so many people seem to struggle with self-worth? I've seen some of the most well-off and attractive people so morbidly unsure of themselves. I gave it some deeper thought. We are all so distracted in our modern lives, trying to live up to social expectations and working crazy hours with an ever-growing cost of living. I think that so many of us have truly started to neglect subtle yet key aspects of self-care that tie directly into your self-worth. And of course, your self-worth directly ties into your ability to walk away from a toxic situation if need be. For us men, certain aspects of self-care are rather taboo. One thing I noticed with a lot of the guys I've talked to about this, including myself, is that we don't put much effort into our choice of clothing and apparel. But something as simple as this can go such a long way. A fresh haircut is the male equivalent of a fresh face of makeup, but we can take this a step further, can't we? One thing I tried was going online, finding some styles I liked, and spending a day going out and buying the stuff I need to make that a reality. Spending some money and investing in myself. It felt strange at first, but I realized I needed to treat myself the same way I treat a woman I'm in love with. It sounds crazy, but trust me, it's part of the process. Get a manicure. My nails are nasty and I know yours are too. Put some focus on scents, colognes, and other fragrances. Take pride in your appearance in every situation. I even found myself dressing nicely and doing my hair even when I was staying in for the night, just to practice doing it for me, doing it because it makes me feel good. There are so many little things that you can do that add up and turn into confidence and build your self-worth. I got back into the gym. I've made it a regular part of my schedule, something non-negotiable. I started to journal more often, gave myself a bit more credit for the positive things that I bring to personal relationships. It was like building any muscle, repetition, practice. After spending some time looking after myself and doing my best to build a larger sense of self-worth, I decided to dig into my relationship habits a bit more. I reminded myself that the last time I went through something similar, I spent 2 years working on myself, and all those lessons went out the window the second I got into a relationship. So in order to prevent that from happening again, I needed to take a long, hard look in the mirror. As I said earlier on in the video, most of the relationships I got into were painfully unfulfilling. I would do anything and everything under the sun to be the best boyfriend possible, and I was always met with massive letdowns. What was the only common denominator in all of these situations? Me. People are massively empathetic. Whether they realize this or not, attraction within relationships is incredibly intuitive. How can things feel so magical at first, and then months or years down the road, the spark is gone? It's subtle changes in character, or icks if you will, that add up over the months or years, and they completely smite attraction. One of my hard to swallow pills is that my yes man behavior, although sweet in some instances, was a subtle subconscious turnoff. Let me explain. Have you ever heard someone say that girls want someone who treats them poorly? Now, that's not entirely true, but there is something there. It comes down to primal instinct. When you're a complete yes man with no boundaries or life outside the relationship, you're not in your masculine frame, and although it may appear as sweet or chivalrous, she will start to wonder why she's not feeling you anymore. It's because a pushover is just simply not attractive. Now, at this point of realization is where a lot of guys get it wrong. A total jerk is also not attractive. You gotta be somewhere in the middle. Being Prince Charming is fantastic, but being Prince Charming also needs boundaries and self-respect to continue to be Prince Charming. Personally, I always struggled with setting hard boundaries for two main reasons. I always felt like people were capable of change when you involve strong communication, but also I held on to a fear of upsetting others into abandonment, which is something that stemmed from my childhood. I would always put an immense amount of effort into romantic relationships as well as platonic, and I was always afraid of losing these relationships. And considering I'm a pretty relaxed personality, I didn't mind making little sacrifices here and there for the sake of peace, which is good sometimes, but when taken too far, you will lose yourself, which is exactly what happened to me time and time again. There was something someone said to me that I'll never forget. It really changed my perspective. I was on the phone with a buddy of mine, upset about the ending of that relationship I told you about in the first part of this video. I talked about how great it was and started listing off all the fun things we did together. And he told me that relationship was so great because you made it great. That grass was green because you watered it. It hit me like a train. I put so much value over these relationships because of the work that I put in to make them great, which in turn meant I could make any relationship great. That realization was a game changer for me. The grass is greener where you water it. That's what a relationship is. Two people with separate lawns watering each other's grasses and watching it grow. I'll water yours if you water mine, but if you stop watering my grass, I'll stop watering yours. That was the part I was missing. When she would stop watering my grass, I just paid more for water and took care of both of our lawns. Look, a relationship can't and won't always be 50-50, but it certainly cannot be one person putting in 90% effort 100% of the time. And I think as a society, we're sort of groomed to believe that relationships are a struggle and the best ones are worth the fight, which is why so many women and men are stuck in painfully unfulfilling relationships. So many people refuse to walk away when they absolutely need to. Because the hard to swallow truth is there are some behaviors that are simply unforgivable after the first offense. And if you let them slide, your partner's subconscious respect for you will degrade, and there's truly no winning for either one of you at the end of the day. How do we avoid utter despair when we have to walk away from people we care about? Don't lose yourself. How do we do this? Whatever it is that you do for yourself when you're single, don't stop when you get into a relationship. As hard as it might be, the right person will understand. I work 12-hour shifts 6 days a week, and I go to the gym 2 hours a day. My girlfriend would love it if I came home instead of going to the gym, but she understands that this is something that I do and that I need to do for myself, and she respects and supports that. The right person always will. Whether we admit it or not, the red flags are always right in front of us. It is painfully obvious when someone is not right for you. You just need to pay attention to the signs and refuse to sell yourself out. If you take anything from this video, let it be that the grass is green where you water it. Don't let anyone kill your grass.